what we're going to do right now is we're going to open it up, and Sister Natalie's not here, unfortunately, but Kate's here and Phyllis is here. So if you would like to ask a question of these two amazing women in the church, please, hit that little button that raises your hand. That helps me most to call on you, and I will call on you as we go. So while you're all getting your questions ready, I have one for Phyllis based on what is in the synthesis document. So there's been this whole movement now, or question, about diaconal ministry in general. Like there's, some places don't have deacons, and there's a question of what are they really supposed to be doing. There was some, I felt, language that was sort of pointing to like, maybe it's just service and not Eucharistic ministry, or, taking part. And I wonder what you think of that as, and here's, for me, in my mind, I feel like I'm worried that it's going to go down this path of, okay, we'll just, if women want it, we'll just take the diaconal ministry apart. We'll reduce it all together. So we can't be accused of saying, well, men can be deacons and women can't for whatever reason. Do you have any feelings about that? Maybe you've got a better sense of how what's happening there.
I can tell you that in 1982, in the second draft of the USCCB at National Conference of Bishops document on women, the second draft said women installed as deacons. And I remember speaking in Providence, Rhode Island about that, and said, either you're a deacon or you're not. There's no such thing as an installed deacon. That went through four drafts. It never, I don't think anything happened to it, but the installation business dropped out. In 2006, Cardinal Casper said, oh, they can be called deaconesses, and they can dress up and they can move around the altar, but we certainly can't ordain them. And that's a very interesting suggestion, except it eviscerates the notion of the diaconate, which as an ordained ministry, an ordained order, which historically has always been a major order. The diaconate in history sits between the subdiaconate and the priesthood. So if you are going to somehow excise the diaconate from that position, I can't see how they could do it. That's one problem. The second problem is that to do so, and to say that the diaconate, particularly women deacons or deaconesses, as they are preferred to be called in the Orthodox churches, to say they're not ordained is an insult to the Orthodox, particularly given the fact that I guess, I forget what year it was, 17 or 19, it was BC, before COVID, that the Patriarch of Alexandria and all Africa ordained 5 women as subdeacons. He wanted to ordain them as deacons, but the Americans who fund him said they would cut him off. I've had communications from somebody who works for me, who's right now in Syria, that a Syrian bishop who is a liturgist plans to ordain women as in the Syriac church, as Catholic church, as subdeacons. He wants to go forward with that. So that would be Catholic women subdeacons. Now, if you're going to ordain Catholic women subdeacons in an Eastern Catholic church, I think you'd have a hard time next October trying to say that deacons are not sacramentally ordained. So there's that. You also have the problem, if you wish to say that the diaconate, say, lay ministry and not an ordained ministry, you have the problem of coming up in collision with the Council of Trent and also with the Second Vatican Council. So if you want to overturn 2 councils and annoy the Orthodox and annoy all the Eastern Catholics, go ahead. But it's not something I would recommend. I don't think it's a good idea. And I think that the problem, and I've heard this from members, the problem of, and I think Cynthia said it the other night on the other video you had, the problem was people didn't have facts. A lot of people were speaking opinion without facts, and that is why the Synod has asked for facts. I don't know how useful the two studies from the commissions will be. I certainly never saw the transmission. None of us has, that went from Cardinal Ladaria to the Pope. And my understanding is that the second commission didn't see the transmission either. So we don't know. It'd be interesting to see it. I did see part of it that was given to the UISG, but there's an interesting thing here. I'm talking too long, but it really, I don't understand it, because Sister Patricia Murray was a member, and I was in the aula in Kate will help me what year it was. I guess I was in the aula in 2019 when the Holy Father gave what he said a portion of their report, my report, to the sisters, and they could do with it what they wanted. And I actually spoke to Sister Pat Murray in last May at the or maybe it was the May before, at the UISG meeting. And I said, why don't you release it? And it had already been published by Sister Jolanta Kafka at the time, the president of USG, that they had received the history portion of our report. And she said, oh, it's only the history portion. And I said, well, yeah, so, you know. So anyway, I don't think making the diaconate a lay ministry would fly. I think revisiting and studying the diaconate is a stopgap measure against restoring women to the diaconate. A bishop years ago said to me, well, we don't know what to do with the deacons we have. If we add women to the mix, then how do we, I said, we'll figure it out, you know, so anyway.
Just a point to clarify there, for the 2016 study that you were part of that was released in what, 220?
No, it was released. It was given to the sisters in May of 2019.
2019.
And
okay.
in January of 2020, Sister Jolanta Kafka, on an interview with Global Sisters Report, said it was the history portion. That's what's public. That's what I can tell you.
Okay.
So I can tell you that in the next UISG meeting, which I guess was May of 22, I said to Pat Murray, why don't you release it? You're allowed to. He also said he got a lot of papers and they could ask for more. I said, why don't you ask for everything and release what you've got? And she said, oh, it was only the history report. So
was that your history? We hope. Okay. All right. Other questions, please.
You can't change history. Look, you can't. Marty Mort, there's a guy named Marty Mort, Amy George Marty Mort, was put up to write a book against women deacons in the 80s. He is the book that is taught in seminaries about women in the diaconate. At the end of his book, he says, well, you know, history alone can't decide this, and we don't have all the history anyway.
Yeah.
But by the end of the chapter, the seminarians are too tired to read, so.
Okay, other questions? Don't be shy, folks. We have two of the best here. Russ, go ahead.
I thought hopefully I might inspire some folks. So Kate, this is a question for you. I know that you've been at many of the synods. You were living in Rome for a while there, but you were at this synod, and I just wonder, obviously on the outside, but I wonder if you could speak to whether there was a different energy there this year, just because of the presence of women and things seem so historic, or just sort of what your take on, what the energy was like.
Yeah, I think the energy had shifted. In the second, we did all of our actions, which was a prayer vigil at the Basilica of St. Praxedis, unfurling of the symbolic synodal tent on the opening of the synod, and then we did a march through Rome. And we had big numbers compared to other actions. So just that alone, just like the interest of what was happening was change. But then the second week in October, we coordinated an international gathering of women's groups from 60 different organizations around the world. And 3 of the Women's Synod delegates came to meet us and shared their experience of what was happening in the Synod Hall. And so just to have that exposure and the conversation brought to us in a way that made it personal and gave it movement, I think was really inspiring, and just, you know, it was just very cool to have women who are voting to be with us and to still be listening to women on the grassroots level. I think that continued throughout the rest of the month. I think just having women, knowing women on the inside and being able to talk to them as much as they were comfortable. I mean, I think that many respected the kind of media blackout and the discernment of keeping what was in the hall, but to have that solidarity and at least those live conversations around the edges was very different for me. And I felt like our witnesses were heard in a way that I was hoping they would be heard, which is to kind of assert ourselves as serious, faithful, and calling for dialogue. I felt like that message was conveyed, and there wasn't an immediate, you know, clap back from the Vatican. It was more like an awareness that women were around and interested in watching. And so in that sense, I felt like there was just all around St. Peter's, it was a much more dialogical energy, if that even makes sense. But I certainly felt like there was more opening, and we knew people there. It was the fruits of a lot of labor. So yeah, it did feel different for me.
Good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Just a follow-up on that, Kate. Somebody in the chat room has asked, could Kate comment on the Women Vote initiative or any other initiatives between now and the next October Synod? Like, are there any plans that you have between now and next October?
Yeah, on the voting part, I don't know. So obviously the next session in October 2024 will be the same participants coming back. And so one of the things that I've heard from women delegates who participated was that the women weren't organized within the Synod Hall. So bishops and people, you know, in the institutional structures have kind of worn paths of how to be networked together. And so one participant told me the women aren't organized enough. And so in any way possible, I'm hoping that the Women's Ordination Conference and maybe FutureChurch can help the women find each other. If that's a WhatsApp group or sharing emails, just a way that women can be connected to one another and to be supporting one another and to be more prepared for the next session. So I think that's a big part of our work, will be connecting women beyond our mission and whatever, just making sure that the women in the room are informed and feel supported and have a community around them. Excellent.
Thanks, Kate. I'm gonna let Rita go next. Rita, you have a question? You'll have to unmute yourself, Rita.
Yeah, am I okay? Okay, good. Thank you. So congratulations, and it's always wonderful to see Kate and Phyllis and Kate, Deb and Russ. So I have sort of a burning question. I was reading a lot of articles, as many were, about the Synod as it was going along, and I had heard that there was a spontaneous intervention by a woman who basically condemned the pursuit of women ordained to the priesthood, and that there's just too much, it's a waste of time, and it's just too much. And you know, anyhow, and that it got a somewhat of an applause. I don't know how big, I don't know. So I don't know, Kate, if you've heard further on that. But in conjunction with that, it may have been in the same article, one of the comments was typical kind of hierarchical jargon, I think. And it said, you know, the whole pursuit of the women's ordination it's political. It's a political issue, not a theological issue. And of course, I say to myself, well, what does the fact that the only people that Jesus spoke to directly with, you know, upon rising were women, you know, is that a theological, does that lead, that's a scriptural fact, does it lead to theological? And this is both for Phyllis and Kate. Is that political, you know, to raise scriptural references, which by the 6th century, or even earlier 5th century Epiphanius, I can't say, who was called out in Mary Malone's first volume of Women in the Church as the biggest misogynist, who made fun of women for citing one of Paul's letters saying, women, can prophesy. And so, where do they get this from? How do they delineate what's theological? And it's almost like a surprise, like answer, like, oh, well, it's like a gotcha. And are they trying to say that scripture doesn't count as a supporting a theology that says, I'm assuming theology would say that we get to know God better as all people who are called to minister can minister. And we certainly have examples from some of the earliest days of the church. That doesn't sound political to me, but I don't know. I would like to know if you've heard this and what your take on this argument is.
Either one, go ahead.
I mean, I think I know the woman that you're speaking about who was really putting down the cause for women's ordination to the priesthood, and I find my response to that is simply that we need more theology and practice in synodality. That in that moment she was very much speaking from a personal perspective and probably not listening to the Catholics around her, the people of God. And so I found it just sort of lacking in a awareness of differing opinions and very much speaking from a personal perspective, and just closed to the possibility of conversion. So I felt like she hadn't heard the call to synodality, the call to encounter, and then she would have had a different perspective on that. It just seemed like a very well-worn opinion based in stereotypes and received messages about women. And so I just found, I think just a general product of the Synod this past October was that we need more theology around synodality. How does it work? What is it? What rises to the top? I think that just exposes the sort of weaknesses in the process. And I don't take it to heart. I think she has her opinion, but this isn't a forum for opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I found it a bit inappropriate for her to kind of express that in such a uninformed or sort of non-synodal way. I guess that's what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Phyllis, about this idea that women just want to be deacons because they want more power? They want political power in the church. I mean, that is.
I don't know about political power. Yeah, I've heard. In fact, I was at a Episcopal ordination a couple of weeks ago, and the priest in line behind me was from Opus Dei, and he recognized my name, and he said, "Oh, well, the women who asked for diaconal ordination really just want to be priests." And I said, "Well, you know yourself," he happened to be Opus Dei, he wasn't diocesan priest, but you know yourself that if somebody goes to a man goes to a bishop, say, "I want to be a deacon because I can't be a priest, I'm married," he'll be shown the door. I said, it's a vocation, a specific vocation to care for the poor and to carry the word of God, the gospel to the people of God. Yes, to serve in the liturgy, but I don't think there's any right to serve in liturgy or preach unless one is working for the poor. And he kind of got it. And I said, secondly, and you can ask any deacon, they have zero power. So now the question of priesthood, years ago, Sarah Butler, when she was a professor at Dunwoody, the Yonkers Seminary, and I had dinner, and she had been asked by Cardinal Ratzinger to write a book against women priests. I've tried to. It's a very difficult book. I don't mean that as a negative comment. It's just very difficult to. It's hard reading. It's complicated. And in fact, the rector at the time of the seminary said, "Did you understand half of what she was talking about?" I said, "I don't think so, But Sarah and I decided she'd stay out of my lane and I'd stay out of hers. And that lasted for a while. And then she got on the bandwagon with people who want to connect the priesthood with the diaconate. And the argument is you can't be deacons because the church has said relatively definitively that you can't be priests. And I say, you really shouldn't argue like that, because I have evidence. I have a trailer truck in the backyard with the liturgies. I have evidence that women were ordained sacramentally as deacons. So if you say you can't be ordained a priest because you can't be ordained a deacon because you can't be ordained a priest, well, then the reverse is true. I know women have been ordained as deacons, therefore they can be ordained as priests, which gets them very upset. But then I say, well, but the church says we have to hold this definitively. And I will tell you, Cardinal Avery Dulles told me the answer to this is that in terms of my work, the legitimate discussion that I can get involved in, which I don't choose to, sometimes I do, about the priesthood debate is the level of the teaching. One has to decide which of the 4 levels of teaching this is, and basically, is it reformable or irreformable? If it is a reformable teaching, and that is the first step. If it's a reformable teaching about priesthood, well, then you can have that discussion. It's not my discussion, and it's certainly not my research. I would fail even on Jeopardy answering a question, but I think that is the direction that research could go. And given that the USCCB yesterday voted to accept the request of the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Anglican Archbishop of Canterbury, to join in a petition to name Cardinal Newman as a doctor of the church, I just think it is definitely the way to go, because he is the one who writes about the reform of doctrine. But yeah, I mean, you get that all the time, and you just can't. I mean, some people you cannot have a discussion with. The woman, I think in question, the Australian woman, who I think works for Bishop Fisher in Australia,
Renee Kohler is her name.
At the press conference, said that ordination was a distraction, and it may be a distraction to her. The ordination of women as priests was not part of the Instrumentum Laboris, and I think that the thought that the discussion about that or any other topic, as it came in over the transom from the outside, was heard often to be a political discussion, which is the opposite of what the Holy Father wanted. Having said that, the whole world has been asking for women deacons. And I think there's been significant question about what's the question about priesthood too. But as I said, it's not my wheelhouse, and I can't give any definitive academic answer to it. I can only say that it's something that the level of the teaching can and I think should be discussed.
Great,
Just
thanks.
to, just to follow up on that just a little bit, the part in the synthesis that talks about, this increased role for the laity, let's be more creative. And then it talks about the fact that, laity can now be lectors and acolytes, and maybe along with that will be preaching. How do you, each of you, read that? I mean, is this an effort to, again, sort of undercut the women in the diaconate, because that is definitely a role that women would have as ordained deacons? Or is it an effort to simply expand the idea of who can preach in the church, which I am very much in favor of course, but what do you think of that part of the synthesis? Like, what do you think is happening? I know it's kind of an educated guess, but.
I mean, you can read it either way. As living in the Holy Father's house, I had the opportunity to have meals with many, many bishops in many countries. And I remember a dinner with the bishops of Cambodia and Laos, Cambodia and Thailand. And I said, what about women deacons? They said, we wouldn't care whether they were male or female. We don't have the educated people to make them deacons. So I think if you're looking at the expansion of lay ministries, there is that possibility. It's only 10 centuries ago, I guess, 9 centuries ago, that bishops were the only ones who were allowed to preach. St. Dominic just broke it open. There's also a section in it about training. This one got me, training more women to be judges. I was like, what's that about?
Yeah.
There are plenty of women judges. The only person who can be a single judge in a tribunal, in a canonical hearing or event is a cleric. And so therefore you have to be a deacon to be a single judge. You have to be a deacon participating in a given mass to preach the homily. And the other, what else I see in Germany, they have lay theologians, which is not technically theologians, to baptize. The ministry of the deacon can be, all of them, I think, except for the single judge, can be performed by lay people, by special delegation, by going through hoops. And I had this discussion with many bishops, and they simply say it's easier for them to train, ordain, and give faculties to the people that they want to perform these functions. Having said that, sometimes you're just stuck, and you need to find a lay person to do it, a non-ordained person to do it. So I think that the Holy Father he has said against clericalizing the laity, and I'm hearing that in a different way now. That he is against removing the lay vocation. I don't think he wants to damage the vocation to the diaconate. I really don't. But I think that there are 47,000 deacons in the world now. What are they going to do? So it could be read as an amelioration to those who are against, or another kicking the can down the road.
Thank you.
And my sense is that this interim report is not trying to be subversive at all. I think they're trying to do what they think is possible, or to reach a consensus. And so I don't think I think it's like a let a thousand flowers bloom, like as many ways that we can empower women, and this is a way that they can think of that maybe wouldn't touch these harder issues. That's my sense, is that they're not trying to subvert anything. They're just trying to do what they can.
Yeah,
I think they can.
This is
yeah, but you don't want to have both and, not either or.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I just wondered. I'm always looking for what might be happening in the background. Brenda Hepler, you have a question. You'll have to unmute, Brenda.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yep, can.
All right. I'm not, well versed in everything you people are doing, but I think it's all very, very important. And the process is there, and it's slow, and it's moving slowly, but it is moving. However, I was very surprised in reviewing the last ends of the Synod, whereby it was in the agreements, and they agreed on this proposal that they would want to investigate and move, think about the at 84, my brain doesn't work as fast as I'd like. They wanted to combat. They were willing to they agreed to combat xenophobia and
Racism,
right. And my question is, why wasn't misogyny included in that effort to investigate? And listening to you and I can't imagine your frustration at times. And I don't I think everything you're doing is the thing to do, but I'm thinking of examining they talk about unconscious racism. I think there can be unconscious misogyny also. And by looking at that or thinking about it in the psychological way, it's another tool, I think, just an added tool to kind of understand or address some of the things that might be unconscious, and you raise it to the surface. And, by examining what misogyny is about, like we've done racism, it might help people, especially these priests and clerics and all this, that if they are the good people they like to think they are, they would be willing to at least examine where their negativity is coming from. And
so Brenda, let me just tell you that there was one little bright light during the synod. Cardinal Hollerich, actually, when the second session started, and it was going to be one of the topics would be women's ministry in the church. Actually, in his remarks, they were amazing. And there is a page that actually has all those documents. I was really taken by the way he challenged the other ordained and male people in the room. And he basically said things, just what you're talking about. He didn't use the word misogyny, but he said, is our baptism the same, or do you think yours is better than women's? And then he goes on to say, have you thought about the fact that your attitudes toward women, even in the church, as you've come to see, do you ever think about the fact that they're shaped by the culture you grew up in, the family you grew up in, the education you received? He went on, and I thought, oh my God, I don't know that I'd ever heard a cardinal challenge his brothers in the same way. I thought that was absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, and I think it would behoove us. I mean, it just sounds like, you try these things and it's just like beating a dead horse. And they're going to come up with something, and that it has nothing to do with what you're trying to do. He's just going to say no, because that's what he wants to say, because he certainly is not going to let anyone tell him that he's wrong, or that, there's another way of looking at this, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I just think it's something, an interesting tool that I think could be used for the benefit of, because being an outsider to all this, it just sounds like the hamster cage. We're just trying something this time, and, and some of it is right on, and valid, but some of the responses are just like, come on. So where are the blocking? What's blocking? Where are the blocks?
Well, I'm not a psychologist, so
yeah. Well, I'm more of that.
I think that it's worth it to read Cardinal Hollerich's. In fact, I'm giving a speech next week in England, and I quote from two of his comments, and one of them says, we're all men here, and so I'm not so. How can I say? I moved a column yesterday or today in the Religion News Service that I said the best comment that I heard leaked from the Synod was, "Your Eminence, she has not finished speaking yet."
I love that.
And I think that and the reports I've gotten back from clerics and non alike were, they're figuring it out. They're figuring it out, and they are learning. They're just learning. One cardinal with whom I texted and emailed during the Synod, I said, "Come on, you guys are driving me crazy." And he wrote back right away and said, "Don't go crazy. We need you." So it's how can I say? At one point, somebody made a remark to me about how I managed working in the Vatican and in living in Casa Santa Marta. I said, it's really okay, because I went to public school, so I was in co-ed 8th grade. I mean, that's what you're dealing with.
Great. Kate, did you have any comment on that yet?
I mean, I think the synod, we really got to, it was a laboratory of cardinals and bishops meeting women at an equal level for the first time. I think the novelty of the round table, which we heard over and over again throughout the synod, and it was very frustrating to me because the bishops were so pleased with themselves that they looked a woman in the face and listened to her. So we're at a very fertile ground. I'm very hopeful, but this is they're trying to change a culture, and this is the beginning steps of that. And you saw even resistance to the table. So I think, it does feel like a hamster wheel, but it's important to keep going.
That's fabulous.
That's a very important point that Kate just made, because some clerics, bishops actually, I've been told, are on so-called on the spectrum. And an autistic male cannot look a woman in the face. And you find a lot of that. So they haven't had to, so now they're learning. But it's very quick, very fast to recognize the fellows who just, it's impossible for them. There is that. You got more questions though.
Yeah, Mary Ellen, you have a question. Go ahead and unmute. Can you unmute yourself? That's okay, take your time. Let's see here.
There should be a little fella on the left, a little
Yeah, no,
microphone.
I've got it. I just had trouble with it, taking it. For me, I think one of the critical issues is the lack of feminine presence in a variety of the ministries does a great disservice by depriving the people of God of their wisdom. And I don't know whether that's something that other people have thought a lot about. I've thought about it since the first time I heard a really good preacher in a Protestant church, and I was like, this is about depriving us of this kind of wisdom.
Right.
Anyhow, just comment.
Well, one comment that came from talking to a synod participant is that the women were longing for diversity in prayer every day, and just like they have a global church gathered in this room. Like, why not let women or people from all over the world celebrate in their diversity and share their liturgical gifts, their ministerial gifts in that sense. So I think there's great opportunity for that. And I felt very tragic that they had gathered this completely diverse and amazing group and didn't let people share some of their own experience. So yeah, there's a huge deprivation there, but I think there's opportunity for sure.
Good point. Good point. Jean, you have a question? Unmute. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Hello, Phyllis. It's been a long time since I saw you back on Long Island. I'm so happy that you're here and that your work was recognized at the Synod. So keep praying. What I don't understand, so as both of you women were interacting with the cardinals and the bishops, and they're saying what's in their area of the woods, do any of them have an inkling as to why the pews aren't filled with more young adults, or is this just something here in the United States that our young adults aren't there in church anymore?
I think, Jean, thank you. They all recognize that there is a problem generally with women. I have just written that women are running out the door.
Yeah.
But they're bringing, their children and husbands with them and their checkbooks. And I think the blatant insult to women, particularly in the question of pederasty. I've just read the other day, now Switzerland is breaking news with pederasty. So I think that they want to say that the Latin Mass will bring people back. They want to say this. No, I think there is a combination of factors, not the least of which is there are many more spectacles to attend, and you hold them in your iPhone, and you don't need the entertainment of church, and you don't need the information from church. But I think the disconnection between ministry and actual ministry and celebration of liturgy is part of the problem. And when you have a community that works together and it feeds the poor together, you then find this is a community that will come together and pray together, often against all odds, often against, as I wrote today, the when I preachers, when I was in seminary, when I was driving my mother to the movies, who cares? Talk about the gospel, and feed the people, nourish them with the words of the gospel, please, and feed the people who are hungry as well, materially hungry. I think that is the disconnect that is seen, and combined with the fact that I only had one person on Twitter complain that she's not afraid to leave her children alone with a priest she doesn't know. I was like, okay, I don't know any other woman who will.
No way. No
Yeah.
way. Yeah. Kate, do you have anything?
Some of the bishops that I've spoken to, especially in the United States, are concerned not only about the lack of young adults in their parishes, but the young adults who are attracted to the Catholic faith right now.
Yeah.
And so when
Yeah.
I tell them that we have
Yeah.
a vibrant young feminist network for women under 40 with more than 400 members, they're very interested in that. And so, and looking for ways that they can engage. And so I think bishops are very aware of it. And I think in the United States, there's a particular situation where even more conservative and traditionalist Catholics are being attracted to it. But yeah, I think it's on everyone's minds.
Thank you so much, because that's what I don't understand, the disconnect in their minds between, okay, we have no young adults, everything that, let's bring back this, bring back that. Well, it didn't work then either. And, right now, my own kids aren't there. It's a heartbreak. Grandkids, forget it. I mean, it is a heartbreak, and I just take consolation that our God is bigger than all of this. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the reality, I have grandkids too and kids, and the reality is, the thing I worry about is just what Phyllis talked about, being nourished on the gospel. That even if you're wonderful parents, your community, there's only so much. There's something very sort of, it changes the way you think about the world, the way you see the world, if you're actually nourished on the gospel itself. And I think that is the real danger of people leaving a place where it is preached.
Well, we left Long Island because our kids were over the bridge, and so there was nothing holding us back anymore. All of the seniors have gone to meet their spouses, and that's great. And we came over to New Jersey. Wanacue. What the heck's in Wanacue? The closest church to us. I looked at their bulletins and, oh my gosh, no, there's nothing. And so we found a parish, because my prayer was, Lord, lead us where you need us. The parish we found ministers to a large Hispanic community. It is vibrant. Baptisms at Mass, maybe more than one at that Mass. It is so wonderful. There's a ministry for adults with special needs. There's a knitting and crocheting. There is something, women's groups with Bible, and it's just amazing. And the laity are involved and are asked to, do stuff. It's a Franciscan parish too. That's my tail cross. But I'm not a secular with this group. I'm still on Long Island with the one fraternity that is like unbelievable. So apparently it's the only fraternity like that in the States. So
Thank you so much for that. It's wonderful. I love to hear about
thank
that.
you.
So, Suzanne, we're going to take one more question and then we're going to kind of close down here with
For the synodal process, it seems to call us to listen deeply to each other and the movement of the Spirit in our lives in the church. And the question I have for each of you is, how have you experienced the Spirit in your efforts?
That's for Kate and Phyllis, right?
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
I mean, I think very early on, I experienced the Spirit throughout the process. Just to start, I remember reading the Vademecum that we got and feeling like, oh, something is moving here. Something is moving. And so at the Women's Ordination Conference, we organized listening sessions for our members so that there could be authentic spaces for them to engage. And we held, I think, 6 sessions in English and 2 in Spanish. And the first session we had, a woman said, which I think has been echoed here also, is like the synodal process is like trying to love again after heartbreak. And just experiencing the vulnerability that people were able to access and share within those listening sessions. And at every session, we had people who were at our first conference in 1975 and people who had just found the Women's Ordination Conference, and having them meet each other and be in tears. So for me, that just actually participating in synodality in a way that sort of put our mission behind us and just we were able to be authentic people together was a moment of the Spirit. And then actually writing our report that we sent to the U.S. bishops, it would be very easy for me to write whatever I wanted and submit it, put our stamp on it and submit it to the bishops. But actually I had to write what was said and what we heard and what was discerned through the process. And so just the actual practice of synodality has been really enlivening for me in ways that I think it's that vulnerability that people are still willing to share, and that tender hope that comes out even in the really difficult conversations, even in those tears. And so for me, that's been the beating heart of the synodal process, is just that tender vulnerability, it beating through a broken heart.
Phyllis,
I would second what Kate said in different ways. In my parish, they had an invitation-only synod meeting with an unpublished report, and for some reason I wasn't invited. But I was able to participate in some of the online synodal discussions that various folks had, and I'm told, I'm advised to look for grace as it comes, and I have more recent examples, but I can share one brief one. I started seminary too many years ago, and I was one of 4 people who were not lifers. My fellows, the other 3 fellows, called me and said the nuncio was coming, so house cassock and sash, and I didn't have that, so I wore a yellow pantsuit, and I sat in the nosebleed seats in the thing. But at the lunch, the fellas put me on the end so that when the bishop and the nuncio walked by, I was there. And the bishop said, "What are you doing here?" He knew me because he played basketball with my father. I said, "I'm in studies." And very soon I got a lovely young priest came, the nuncio's secretary, and said, "The nuncio would like to see you in the front hall." I said, "Oh, okay." So I went, and the sun was shining. It was October, and he asked me what I was doing there. And I said, "Well, I came to study to be a deacon, but they said I was too smart to be a deacon, and they put me in the priest track. And so I am studying in the priest track." And he interviewed me for 20 minutes. And at the end, he said, "Don't quit." And I haven't. And I think if my math is correct, that was 45 years ago. So, and you look for these little moments of grace and try to remember the good ones and hang on. For me, synodality was, I don't have my cell phone here, but texts and emails, and I was not in Rome, but I had a lot of contact with members of the synod during the synod. And was able to answer questions. You know, that's what I can do. I can provide facts and help people form their own opinions in the light of the Spirit, and continue my own work to be clear that that what I'm saying is not my opinion, but it is my I think my graced understanding of what the church, well, it would be my opinion, my graced understanding of what the church can do and should do. So
Great. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to just give you, somebody's asked this question twice, so I want to make sure I ask it. It's one of these impossible to answer questions, but really good question. It says, we are all on the synodal path to next October, even if we're not voters. How can we engage in listening and being listened to by the many people of God who may also be listening to the Holy Spirit, who are opposed to allowing the inclusion in all ordinations by women and transgender people? So that's been asked a couple times. So what do we do if we feel really deeply that some issue needs to come forward? In this case, this person's asking about inclusion of women in ordination and transgender people, which Pope Francis just did a really nice thing not too long, a couple days ago. So,
well, I think there are 3 questions there. One is deacon, there are 4 questions, 5 questions, deacon, priest, and then male, female, and trans. And the current law is that trans cannot be ordained. That's the current law. So that's one level on which the discussion can be. The current law is supported by, the argument is supported by doctrine that women cannot be ordained as priests. There has never been any doctrinal finding that women cannot be restored to the ordained diaconate. So the discussion has to be held in a prayerful discussion, understanding the constraints of law and the direction in which things can be changed or cannot be changed.
And
okay.
my advice would be to just knock on closed doors, to make your voice known. I mean, when I lived in Rome for 8 years, I would show up at Vatican offices with a bouquet of flowers for the Cardinal and get a meeting. I would just say, yeah, this is a delivery for the Cardinal. And they would say, oh, is it his birthday? And I would say, no. But I would just make sure, send your reports, send your communication to the Vatican. They have made the invitation as wide as possible, and you have to hold them at that. And so I would just, like the Women's Ordination Conference, we sent our website to the Vatican, our resources, and they put it on the Vatican website. And I would just continue to make your voices heard, submit your reports to the US bishops, the Synod email address. They want to be as inclusive as possible. So take them at their word and just make sure, just keep knocking on these closed doors.
Amen, sister.